Welcome to the Blitz Growth Podcast. Listen in to learn how founders, entrepreneurs, and creators build and scale their businesses online. Let's get started.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Blitz Growth. Today I have Eric. So Eric is an extremely impressive man. He has done so much in the influencer marketing space. I was lucky enough to meet him when I first moved to Los Angeles. And so today I wanted to sit down with him and talk about a bunch of things. So Eric owns a massive influencer marketing agency in Los Angeles. He works with Fortune 500 companies, and he organizes and brokers a lot of the influencer marketing deals. So he has a lot of knowledge in the space of what the value of influencer marketing is, how to spot good influencers, and how to use them to grow your business. So today I'm going to talk to him about all of that and how he got started and how he grew his influencer marketing company, and then what you should be looking for in terms of influencer marketing and how to be successful in that space. So Eric, thanks for having you.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks, Jack. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. And I think what we probably want to get started with is like a little bit of a background. I know you've done so much over the last, I've only really known you for kind of like 5 or 6 years. But even from when we first started, you've grown your company so much over those last few years. Maybe if you just go through a quick sort of background of sort of like how you got started, how you got into the influencer marketing space. I know you were a super early adopter.
Yep.
And then where you are now.
Yeah. So, the story is interesting because this was really all one big accident. Was not planning in working in the talent industry, despite growing up in LA. Never had aspirations to work with talent or work in the entertainment space. Essentially, the way I got started, I had an app that was a flash sales app and was looking for a way to market it, where we had this conundrum where we had to, raise money to grow it, but we had to have an audience to raise money. And so it was a little bit of a catch-22. And at that same time, my brother Alex started working with people on social, before the word influencer was really coined, just people on social with a following, to promote a denim line that he started. And he was getting demand for these jeans. He didn't really have any in production. He just had a handful of samples. He didn't have even a website, but you could see on Instagram at the time, we're getting thousands, he was getting thousands of comments, and likes, and people asking, where can I buy these? Where can I get them? And so we knew there was something there. And this was at a time when social had a big question mark of whether it could turn into social commerce. And Instagram especially was seen as a platform for, quote unquote kids. It wasn't seen as anything commercially viable. And so, the first test was us saying, well, okay, we need to grow an audience. We don't have money. Can we have some of these guys that you're working with for your denim brand post about this app? And it was a flash sales app. We aggregated daily deals. And he said, sure. And so they were posting about it. And we saw thousands of downloads come in, and we saw purchases happening. So we knew that there was something very real there. But the big problem...
So just on that, quickly to recap. So what you said around Instagram was really interesting, because I think that's probably where like Snapchat and TikTok almost are right now. Just to jump the gun a little bit, what do you think about those two channels eventually creating a marketing channel like Instagram? Or what do you think about that? Because I just want to go over that and then we'll go back to your story.
Yeah, I think, so it's interesting. I think Snapchat, back in 2015, 2016 was really exciting. The challenge I think that they had was they had this mentality of not being influencer friendly. It was really an idea of, people are just creators and people are friends, not this idea of people following others that they don't really know. And so they made it really difficult. Actually, they didn't even make any functionality or features to discover other people. And so they really left the door open for Instagram to come in and really take out that market share when they release stories, because all they had to do is copy the functionality. And the reason that works so well is because with Snapchat, you couldn't discover new people. And so what was happening was people were using Instagram and Twitter to drive adoption, and build their audience on Snapchat. And so when Instagram put stories native on the platform, those same creators didn't have to jump through the hoop of moving their audience over. They could address them directly on Instagram. I on the TikTok front, I'm actually really excited about TikTok as a platform. I think, unlike Snap in the early days, TikTok, also reminds me of Instagram, but TikTok has this really native set of creators that weren't creators on any other platform. They really grew up out of TikTok, and they emerged from TikTok. And so you have a platform with a real native community built in it. And I also think the format is just super interesting. And if you look at the adoption numbers, I mean, it's insane, right? And what we've been seeing is, despite all the friction on the regulatory side with a potential ban, TikTok is still growing fast. Yeah, full steam ahead and growing. And so I think there's huge opportunity there.
Yeah, well, I know they're really pushing the ad network because they keep trying to get us to sign up and spend money. The hesitation we've had so far is because a lot of the ad agency side of stuff that we do is very kind of like direct response still. It's very revenue and ROI driven. And on Snapchat, we're finding that we're starting to see those guys get a little bit older and they have credit cards, they have money to spend. They're starting to adopt consumerism a little bit more. TikTok at the moment, we're still a little bit standoffish because we're not sure about whether we want to go into it and then it get banned, or if the audience is old enough yet, because we see the same thing happen in, as you said, Instagram, and then it kind of happened in Snapchat, and I think TikTok. But I do think the UX and design is just so good on TikTok. It's unbelievable compared to any of the other apps.
Yeah, I mean, it's crack, right? Like you'll go on for 2 minutes, or thinking you'll go on for 2 minutes, and then an hour later you're still scrolling. I think to that point, it really reminds me of the early days of Instagram as well, in the sense that, one of the first campaigns we did was for $4,000, and we got this brand 70,000 new followers on Instagram.
Not bad.
And the conversation at the time was, this is great, but we don't really know what it means. Like, is it good? Like, does it mean anything? Is it just a vanity metric? And you fast forward to today, and you have companies spending hundreds of thousands of dollars over several months to build something similar, to build a quality audience of that size. And so I think with TikTok, where it is today, for the early adopters taking that risk, there's actually a huge advantage, because TikTok can, it could go viral. It's very UGC driven. And so you can go from 0 to hundreds of millions of views very quickly and very inexpensively with the right strategy and, a bit of luck. Which I think with Facebook and the direct response side, it's fantastic because you could dial in what the ROAS is going to be. More or less like, kind of what your bottom threshold and your top threshold is going to look like. But you don't have that with TikTok. But again, you also have the ability to just, get a lot more efficient. Like there's not a huge chance, especially if you're running paid ads on Facebook, that you're going to get 100x ROAS from paid campaign. But the trade-off is you're going to get a very consistent ROAS. And you can manage it, and it fits a lot nicer into like a business model. So I think TikTok is still in that experimental stage, but I would say it's worth definitely experimenting with and diving into, because it is going to go in the direction of where Facebook is now in terms of maturity, and there's an opportunity to really take advantage of the fact that not a lot of other advertisers are on the platform yet.
Yeah, well, I was kind of almost excited for them to have a US branch so that they could continue to operate and all the data was kept in the US and that sort of stuff. And, I think it probably would have helped with their growth of the platform, because when you look at the consumerism, a lot of it still happens in the US, even though the audience size of China and India or even Indonesia are so much bigger. The online commerce just hasn't quite got to the point of the US yet. So you still have, like, for example, in India, you purchase something online and you pay for it in cash on delivery. So the online checkout experience just hasn't been streamlined enough in places like that in comparison to the US, where people are shopping all day, every day online, probably more so than in stores now. So I think the commerce side of things, once that also gets dialed in, I think you'll start seeing the value of the platforms that they produce really, really take off.
100%. And when you look at, you ask yourself, like, why is Walmart so interested in doing a deal with TikTok? It sounds a little crazy, right, on the surface. But when you think about it, you have apps in China like Taobao, right, that have live features where essentially it's like a QVC streaming, sort of service where people are selling products. You have the same thing with Amazon Live that they recently announced. And so, and when you look at social commerce, TikTok has huge potential to drive real purchases. Someone was telling me the other day, there's an influencer on TikTok that goes up to people with nice cars and asks them what they do for a living. Like, oh, what do you do? What do you do?
That's brilliant.
It's great. Really easy content format, right? Like, just stand outside and walk up to people with nice cars. But one of the people he went up to, I guess, owned like some sort of watch store, in Houston or Dallas or somewhere in Texas, right? And that person then created a TikTok saying, "Hey, I don't know who you are, but I had my biggest earning week ever from your post on TikTok," right? And so,
nice.
And this isn't an uncommon sort of story we hear with influencers. When it's a good fit and the audience lines up, it really is effective. But thinking about, bridging that gap, imagine someone on TikTok, is picking from one of the thousands of products that Walmart has to offer, and especially since Walmart's online business has been doing, fairly well. Imagine bridging that gap where you could just buy a product directly from Walmart online, or go to your local Walmart and pick it up, and bridging that. So I think there's huge potential with TikTok and social commerce, and I definitely think it's the future of how everything is going to be working.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And so to get back to your story, actually, like how you know so much about this, we got to the point where you started out with an app, you started discovering influencer marketing before it was even a thing. And then where did you go from there after you and your brother sort of have uncovered that?
Yeah. So, the next big challenge we had users on the app, they're making purchases, but we were doing flash sales on affiliate deals. So those margins were terrible. We're talking like 3% or 4% on discounted, goods that were already maybe 70% off or 60% off. So really razor thin. And so we saw a lot of good traction coming in, but the next thing was, okay, how can we as a company, take a larger piece and have it be more sustainable? And, so we said, okay, well, let's start approaching brands directly to feature their products on our app. And so we went to a trade show in Vegas. We started having conversations, and we found that every brand we talked to was really not that interested in moving discounted goods on our app, especially on consignment. At this time, you had a lot of the big flash sale sites that were just buying the goods outright. And so the consignment model didn't really excite them, but they were very interested in how we were marketing the app, right? Because the question we got was, okay, well, you have these users. How are you getting these users? And we'd walk through that story. And very quickly, I kind of realized after several pitches, okay, no one really cares about this app. Let me try something. I walked up to a brand in a booth at the trade show and said, hey, we have marketing capabilities. I pulled out my phone. I was like, look what we did for this app. With this app we built, and I just pulled up the back-end analytics, and they were sold. And so then we took the spreadsheets of influencers, and at the time, we called them social celebrities, Insta famous, promoters, whatever, a lot of words, a lot of different terms. But we took the list, of these influencers, that we developed, and we started building upon it, and we started, calling them and asking them, hey, do you want to post for this company? We'll pay you. And one of the interesting things was we were paying people now who now are making, tens of thousands of dollars per engagement. We would go and offer them like 50 or $100 and say, hey, we want to pay you to post. And the response was, oh my God, someone wants to give me money to post on this platform.
First time they've ever been pitched that, probably.
Yeah. It was just like, wow, this is insane. And so it was very early on, and we were, probably the first company out there that was, that wasn't a talent agency and wasn't working with big names, but just reaching out to people with followings and paying them to post. And so that's how we started. And we shelved the app, the flash sales app, and we said, let's, clearly more people care about this. We solved the problem we had. Looks like a lot of other people have that same problem. Okay, how do we now scale this? And so that was the next big challenge, is figuring out what the model should be and what the right model needs to be to scale in this new world, of influencers.
Yeah, because I suppose, it's really hard to find the way of structuring a deal that hasn't really existed before, and trying to figure out what the value is for the brand which you're promoting, and then what the value is to the social celebrity or the influencer. Yeah. Are there any like super interesting deals that you did early on where it was like working with really random people, or just like crazy results on like super early influencer campaigns, or was tracking just like not even possible?
So this was at a time like before, Instagram was the main platform we worked on. And this was at a time before Instagram had any of the ad functionality. I mean, this was, I think, even pre-Facebook acquisition. So it was very early on. You had the link in bio, and that was about it. But we ran campaigns where, going back to that like $4,000 example, I think we reached like 20 million people. And this was at a time too when you had the Discover page on Instagram where everyone saw the same thing. And so if you made it on that page, it blew up. Instant success. And so, one other thing we did is we threw a party. We had the Chainsmokers actually there DJing at the time when they were getting started, which was great. The self, I forget the song, like Let Me Take a Selfie or whatever, the selfie song, the content was actually from that party. It was crazy time. But we took over the popular page on Instagram for like 2 days from that party alone. And so it just was a really crazy time when, everything was new. And it was interesting because we had this, like, it's almost like, we found, this incredible source of value, and the hard part was convincing people, like convincing brands of the value. But like, we look at this, we're like, oh my God, the amount of, reach we could achieve. It was like the holy grail of marketing that we found at the time. And, we're holding this holy grail, and then we're going to brands, and like, they're just looking at this, like, still spending money on television with their arms crossed.
They're not getting it. Yeah.
They're not getting it. It just wasn't clicking. They're like, okay, social, is that even a thing? Do people actually spend money on social? And this was at a time when, I don't know if you remember a site called The Fancy, but The Fancy was sort of like the, it was like the big test of can social convert into sales? And that was like the big sort of experiment that was being done. And so there was just a huge question mark of whether, again, social was economically viable and commercially viable. And so we would look and be like, oh my God, here's the holy grail. We could literally do anything. We could promote anything. And everything was really new and exciting. And then again, like the friction was just convincing, a lot of old school marketers of the value. And of course now they're convinced. And, it's, and now that ability to adopt on new trends in social that learning curve is a lot shorter. We didn't have to spend nearly as much time convincing them of TikTok. They got it, or like looking at Twitch or looking at, other platforms. It was just a more seamless learning curve, but that initial one was pretty huge and pretty crazy.
So coming back to that and looking at that learning curve, like how did you make your first $1,000? Was it as Open Influence as the agency, or was it something else before it turned into the agency?
So it was the agency, but we were operating under a different name then. We were operating under Instabrand, which, starting on Instagram and thinking about like this like world of instant everything, we liked it, and so we started under that name. First, Instagram didn't like it though. they didn't like it, and then eventually too, we decided that changing it was the right move, because we were getting pigeonholed as an Instagram only platform, despite being across all the other platforms and doing a lot of work across every platform, where we'd have to spend 5 minutes of every meeting just showing them that, yes, we're not Instagram only. Look how much we've done on YouTube. Look how much we've done on Snap. Look at all our work across the board.
Okay.
But first 1,000 was actually funny. So one of I think the very first deal we did was with this small bracelet company, and it was like a $1,500 campaign. And the guy would make me drive all the way to Vernon every month to pick up the check, and he'd spend maybe an hour and a half negotiating, trying to peel out like $500 from the $1,500. And I'm like, look, I should probably bill you for the gas that it took me to get here, and the time I had to
those expenses.
Yeah. We built his e-commerce business from nothing. But I think it was a good process and a good learning process. Because that was probably the most difficult thing. His assistant would come by and drop off a printed out book of each Instagram post, and you go through and he'd circle stuff and he'd complain. And anyway, so we
how times have changed.
Yeah. And they haven't in some sense, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely a very interesting experience. And so we had to learn, okay, not only do we have to be really efficient in how we engage with influencers, but how are we going to figure out the best way to streamline communication and education on the brand side? And so, that was probably, that was probably like the first, kind of proof of concept. And it worked well.
Yeah, it was always super interesting asking entrepreneurs what their first $1,000 was, because it's always so different to where they are now. And a lot of the stories are really interesting, how people make their first $1,000. But on top of that, like looking at some of your more recent stuff, like what are the sort of campaigns you're working on right now? And what are you seeing as trending in that space? Because obviously we had crazy organic reach at the start of Instagram. And then obviously the organic reach is a little bit tougher now because it's a little bit more saturated. So what are the sort of campaigns you're working on now? And what are you seeing success in? And what are you thinking that, Q4 is going to be big with?
Yeah, I mean, I think, given everything that's happened this year, COVID has had a pretty big impact on everything, right? But in terms of influencer marketing and advertising, we've seen, not surprisingly, a pretty big shift of budget coming out of apparel. Obviously, travel is no longer as big as it was, and we've seen a huge spike. Yeah, exactly. But we've seen a huge spike in consumer goods. We thought it would mainly come from cleaning products first, but a lot of the cleaning products wanted, I think, to spend a little more time in waiting to not come across as opportunistic right out the gate. But we've seen a lot of food, cleaning products. We've seen a big spike in fitness and health and wellness. So a lot of a lot of like organic based supplements have been doing well. Entertainment's been interesting. So we've been working with a lot of the studios for a while. Obviously, like there are not a lot of big like theatrical releases happening. So, we've seen a shift from the big studios to more of the streaming services, which has been interesting and a lot of fun to work on. One thing that we were surprised with initially, but makes perfect sense. We saw a big jump of our budget coming from telecom. And so like a lot of the mobile carriers and internet providers, which makes sense. People want to upgrade their plans and services right now.
For sure. Internet's booming.
So,
home
internet's
internet
booming.
is probably going crazy. They should have rolled out 5G.
Yeah, exactly.
Would have been perfect timing.
Yeah, and so we're gearing up for like a lot of like stuff around 5G too right now, and but it's and with the election, we've done some work on the political side. We try not to get too involved in parties per se, but we're doing a campaign now to help increase voter turnout, and so. But yeah, it's been an interesting year for sure. But in terms of like other trends, like general trends, Instagram I think is still Instagram and YouTube I should say are still the 800-pound gorillas in influencer marketing. But TikTok has just been so amazing and so fun to see grow. We've been doing a lot of work too on an international basis. So we've been working in the Chinese market more than ever. And so that's been really fun, helping clients launch on Weibo and build out, their presence there and help them solve their problems, entering that market and working with not influencers, but what they call KOLs in the Chinese market.
So wait, so what does a KOL stand for?
So a KOL is a key opinion leader.
Ah, interesting. And that's what they call influencers, or that's like a step above an influencer?
It's what they call influencers. So I think it's interesting because when we talk about influencers, people like they immediately go to like your model on the beach taking selfies, like someone very vain, very vapid, not necessarily an expert, which is not the case at all. When we work with influencers, I mean, more times than not, like these are educators, they're teachers, they're subject matter experts in their field. They have real domain expertise. They have real trust with their audience. So like from that standpoint, even though, these terms are interchangeable more or less, I like the idea of a key opinion leader. I think it's a better descriptor for influencers than the word influencer.
Yeah, it does sound a lot better. And when it comes to, on that point, when it comes to brands trying to find key opinion leaders or influencers, what do you think brands should be looking for? Because, there's obviously, like the way I usually describe influencer marketing is like it can either do really, really well, or if you make some bad decisions, it can go really badly. So how do brands make the right decisions for their influencer campaigns to go really well? Because I know the power of influence marketing is huge. Like the distribution is like unlike anything else in terms of CPMs, if you get it right. But, obviously inexperienced people coming in a lot of the time overpay, or they don't track properly, or they don't have the right content to the market. Like, what do you see as, what should a brand be looking for when they're trying to find or run a successful influencer marketing campaign?
Yeah, and I think that's important. Like I have brands approach me all the time that say, "Oh, influencer marketing doesn't work." Well, it's like, well, yeah, like if you do anything wrong, it's not going to work, right? So it's very easy to do it wrong because I mean it's a new industry, and people underestimate what goes into it. People think, okay, yeah, influencers, I just reach out, but there are so many moving parts involved, and it's not as mature as a lot of the ad buying is, where you can plug into a DSP and just or a bidding system and make and purchase ads in real time.
Experience is more important in influence marketing, I think.
Yeah, like there's so many nuances to navigate. But first and foremost, it all starts with finding the right influencers to deliver a specific message. So, when you're looking at building a campaign, you have to understand what's your value proposition as a brand, as a product. What's your exact goal? And everyone's like, oh, my goal is to drive sales. Well, it's like, no shit, everyone's goal is to drive sales, right? Like that's the goal of any business. but like, what's your goal in the sense of, for this campaign, like what's going to get that sale done? Does your product require a certain level of education, right? Are you marketing a product that's never been seen before, where you have to really invest in educating the consumer? Is it something where the value proposition is really obvious and you're selling based on style or trend or whatnot? So it's really understanding how you're going to drive that conversion, and then crafting that message. And understand, okay, what platforms as well are going to be the right channels to reach your audience, right? If it's a longer learning curve, you might want to look at more long form content like YouTube. And YouTube's a great platform as well, because people are just really loyal to the YouTubers that they subscribe to. And YouTube is a great platform as well, because you could really go in depth. And so whether you're doing just an integrated ad or a dedicated ad, which means the whole video is about your product or your brand, both are really good options for driving value. So understanding that, and then selecting the right influencer, again, that's really the key, where I think a lot of brands get tripped up. They look at it from a shotgun approach of like, everyone with a following is an influencer. And I think the important thing to note is, popularity is not influence. Having a lot of followers doesn't mean anything. It's having the right followers and someone that has the right level of trust for communicating whatever it is you want to communicate to those followers. And so, we built a system, to not just say, okay, here's an influencer that's in fitness, or here's an influencer in beauty or whatever. Like looking at fitness as an example, fitness doesn't mean anything, right? If you're talking about, basketball as opposed to kayaking, both could be fitness, but, one would apply well to Under Armour. The other is perfect for Patagonia. So you have to get really granular into what the content is. And so what we do is we look at every piece of content influencers create across their platforms. We run that through text analysis, image recognition. We have over 300 billion data points that we look at in our system. So a lot goes into this, and we've spent years developing it. We've been on the bleeding edge of artificial intelligence in the application of image recognition and building machine learning models. So a lot really goes into figuring out what it is that these influencers talk about and building a comprehensive profile. And then we could look and say, okay, how do they perform, or how does their audience react when they talk about these things? So, for marketing, and this is a real example, if we're marketing avocados, right? Because avocados, you have avocados from California, avocados from Mexico.
California avocados.
Yeah, and it's a big business. Everyone loves avocados. So so we want to find influencers that perform well when they take pictures of breakfast or avocado toast, right? And so we can literally find the influencers who perform the best, or whose audience engages the most when they post content about breakfast than when they don't. And then we can break that out further and see what other sponsorships have they done and how have those sponsorships performed against their baseline. And so we could easily look in and say, okay, these influencers' audience engages well above average when they talk about this versus that. So that lets us know whether, like, if their average engagement rate's 3%, but when they talk about avocados or when they talk about breakfast, it's 9% or 10%, we know that that's a really good influencer for that message, and we know that their audience will lean forward in that. So that's someone we'll select, and then we'll work with the influencer. And this is, we'll negotiate the rates. We've built really sophisticated pricing models. I can't tell you, how many times I've seen brands grossly overpay influencers when they work direct. It's almost like in real estate, like you make money on the purchase, not the sale, right? So getting a good price up front and knowing what to pay is key. And so we have pricing models from tens of thousands of transactions and years of doing this. And so we could dive in and say, like, this is what, here's what the right price should be for this ask, for this campaign. And so we'll engage with those influencers, then we'll really work with them to make sure that the content, the thing people are engaging in, is as good as it can be. It's not just influencer post and it's great. They're creating content, and there's so many ways content can go wrong, right? The label's not shown properly, it's zoomed out, it's blurry, there's a competing logo in the background. So we really work to make sure that the content's as good as it can be and touch it up, and then have the influencers post. And so we've really built a really tight process from A to Z to help brands engage with influencers at each step of the way, and do it at scale without sacrifice for quality.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. I suppose it's kind of like the housing market as well, where you have comps of a house and you look at everything else in the area, what they sold for, all those metrics, and do the comparison. So it's crazy that that's now getting applied to kind of like influencer marketing. But yeah, so just to kind of go over that. So you're saying essentially you need to really match your product, brand messaging, brand voice with the right influencer. And then on another level, that influencer's content needs to be amplified when it's talking about the topic of your brand. So for example, you really need to find the right influencer, and then that influencer has to have a higher than average performance on the type of content you're asking them to post. And that's kind of like that winning combination. Yeah. And so when it comes to pricing that, so obviously you have so much data backing all your pricing models. How do you, what are the biggest mistakes that you see people making when they're overpaying?
I think there are a few. One is, first, when they're looking for influencers, they're automatically reaching out to the top 20 or biggest names that come to mind. And that's a mistake, right? If you want to Google top food influencers, well, guess what? Everyone's Googling that, and their prices are going to be driven way up because there's so much more demand for them because they're so visible. And so you need to really, I would say reach out and expand beyond, to either mid-tail or micro or whoever else is just not those obvious fits. And then from there, understanding that, some influencer, there are many influencers that are highly professional, that are honestly we're so impressed and so thankful to work with and partner with. And there are others that will, that are maybe less professional that, might just, want to take advantage of a brand and charge something ridiculous because they know they can. And so I think there's a whole process of knowing what to negotiate and also how to build out the contracts to make sure that, you're covered and protected as a brand. And so, that's really a process from A to Z, and the important things to look out for. And then, pricing is just, I think you have to really know what the market looks like, and there's not a good insight. And you said it about real estate. We always use that analogy early on where we said we're building the CoStar of influencer marketing because CoStar is a tool for commercial real estate to look at comps, like how much, what are the different variables involved in this building? What's the price per square foot? And so it's essentially the same thing. How do we, how do we break that down? And that's effectively what we've built.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. On the surface level, I don't think anybody thinks about how much goes into influencer marketing. And I think that's one of the reasons why some people see success and they say, oh, it doesn't work. It's because, they're doing it wrong. And they haven't thought about all of this extra layer of information that they need to have for it to be successful. So no, all of those are really good points. And I think for working with my experience so far with working with influencers, it's usually easier when they don't necessarily have kind of like an agent involved and there's not a ton of decision makers. And it's kind of like the micro end I have found a little bit easier if you're a single brand and you're just trying to get started, going with smaller micro influencers. If you get it wrong, it's not as bad as a financial hit. And then you also get to build up some experience with working with influencers before you start going and buying $10, $20, $50, $100,000 on a single post. Yeah. What's kind of your opinion on influencers having agents and where that kind of direction or where the industry you think is going there? Because I do know it's an interesting topic for the influencer marketing space.
So it's interesting. I think before we got started, I look at the talent industry, right? And you have the big talent agencies out there, and the big talent agencies, their business models representing the top, 0.1% of talent. And you look at what an agent does and how much goes into it, but like that doesn't scale to the other, 99.9% of talent out there. For someone with 50,000 followers, let's just say, does it make sense to have them have an agent? Like, does an agent really have the time to spend with them? Like, and also I think the way the deal flow works is it's, flowing from the brands now to the agents, right? Or to the influencers, as opposed to the agents being the one to procure it. So I think agents, on the influencer side do make a lot of sense still, but they make sense once you reach a certain size or threshold. Below that, the economics just don't work out for either party. And so one of the big things that we went to solve is we said, well, there's this whole other 99.9% of the talent industry that is, not lucrative enough for the talent agencies to address. And we said, instead of being a supply side model, meaning we represent the talent, we said we believe that a demand side model, where we represent the advertiser, is the right model for addressing this other 99.9% of the market. And so that's what we did. In terms of ease of working, I think it goes twofold. One, if it's a good agent, which we work with a lot of great agents, they're reasonable, and they keep things moving, and they make sure the influencer, does what they're supposed to, and it works. Without an agent is also great, because when you don't have a great agent, or you kind of have an agent that's not professional, or like is new to everything. Yeah, like when it's like the friend of the influencer or whatever, then it's like there's sometimes that lack of understanding for how business is done. And there's more friction added to the process than not, where like they'll anchor a crazy rate, they'll kind of play games, and then kind of, but once they get a little more mature, they tend to also realize like, okay, like if I'm easy to work with if my influencer is easy to work with, and I make this seamless as possible for brands, and I make sure that, we are making sure that the content's good, and that we're doing reshoots when we need to, and when we don't follow through, because that's what's going to help deliver results. Then it, then everything moves smooth. But like I think in terms of value, I think definitely, like any form of marketing, there's learning involved, right? So you need to learn what works and what doesn't, and there's a learning phase, right? So there's no way to get around that, and so I think in that case, you're much better off working with smaller influencers through that learning phase, especially before ramping up. I think a big mistake a lot of brands make is they go and they will throw like, tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars on a big celebrity, and then nothing happens. And it's like, well, yeah, that person is not a match for your brand at all. You might like them personally. You might think they're a great celebrity, but they're not the right match for your brand. Their followers don't care. And sometimes you're surprised too around what converts and what doesn't. I mean, I know we've worked with like a meal prep company in the past. We thought that, chefs would be the right approach. And what we found were just like everyday people that were like homebodies were actually much better for driving conversions. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting because on 2 points there. So one, we've got a friend that, works in the gaming space, and so manages a lot of gamers and talent in there. And like some of the horror stories that come out of how unprofessional some of those gamers are, because they're just like, they're so young. They don't know how business is done. They don't know what deal structures they should do. They don't know how to behave and act. And so they have a whole team that's put in place just to manage their gaming talent and tell them what to say, tell them how to act, screen their socials, make sure that they're kind of like staying still professional enough, but still engaging with their audience. And that's a whole job in itself. Just kind of like managing that online persona and teaching and educating them how they should be positioning themselves, what they should and shouldn't be saying, and all that sort of stuff. So it's crazy that job even exists in 2020. So who knows what 20, 40, 50, 60 is going to hold. 20 years ago, that wasn't even a job.
No, and literally that's we have a whole team dedicated to that. I mean, we need to make sure that the influencers do what they're supposed to do or what they agreed to doing, and are showing up on time, and posting on time. And again, like, we have many amazing partners that are super professional, and a pleasure to work with. But there are always those cases where influencers just do the craziest things. They're supposed to show up for a shoot. We ship a car across the country, and they decide to go on vacation into another country. So a big part of what we do is we have contingencies in place that we plan for. We then have, strict terms in our contracts. We also have ratings for influencers, where we're looking at how quickly they respond to their emails and open their emails. How professional are they? How well do they adhere to contracts? That's internal, yeah. So we do you
can create the next Yelp of influencer.
It's essentially that, yeah. When we're doing thousands of these engagements with influencers per month, and we're gathering all this data, and so it's super helpful for us to just know, if someone's not that responsive, or let's say someone has a low score for adhering to a brief. If we have a live event, which we don't do now, but if we have a live event, they're a no-go, right? We don't want to be chasing them to make sure they show up. We don't want to be hunting them down. We want someone who's really going to show up well. And so, it just really depends on what you need. But I think a lot of people look at this space and think influencers are people I could just reach out. They all struggle once they try to scale it. And that's where you need a really solid approach. You need technology, you need data to figure out what to do, and you need a team that understands the nuances of how to manage this.
Yeah, so just to recap all of that. So say I'm my own brand, what should I be looking for in a partner when I'm looking for influencers? Because obviously I want to find an influencer who I can just keep going back to and keep delivering results with. And I want to kind of vet all of them. So what kind of like a standout things that I need to, I suppose, consider or look for when I'm looking to find an influencer to help me with my brand?
Yeah, I mean, first look at the fit, make sure they're a really good fit for your audience. Look at, ask for, screenshots of their impressions and any sort of data. Any conversion data from prior work is super helpful as well to benchmark. Without more advanced tools, that's a really good way of doing it. And then there's also going to be a point of diminishing return to some extent. So meaning if you're just working with the same influencer every single week for 8 weeks, you're not going to get that same return. So you can create long-term partnerships for sure, but make sure that you're building a large enough network of influencers to where it makes sense. And you can grow with them, but you're also not limited to just a handful, because you're going to tap out, pretty quickly if you're relying on just that for your continued growth.
Got it. And then I know a lot of this comes down to the quality of the content. So what are some quick tips on creating better content for either brands trying to create content or creators and, profiles who are trying to become more of more of an influencer?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, if you're a brand working with an influencer, really nail down and distill what's important that you want to communicate as a brand. What's the value proposition, and then give the influencer a level of creativity to really have fun with that. And because influencers are creators, so if you give them the right sort of goals, they'll take it from there and they'll create something amazing. And work with them on that, and find out what works for them and what their audience engages in. Depending on what the marketing goal is, you have to figure out is there a specific call to action that you want to push, or is it more of just talking about the brand in general, right? So I think that's something very important to note. If you're having them post a story, for example, that's where you might want to have maybe a much more direct call to action where they could swipe up. Or if you're doing something on YouTube, you could do a promo code and a link in the description, and make sure there's just a really good call to action there. And so I think, the big takeaway though is give the influencer creativity, work with them, and give them sort of enough of a guardrails to play within, and just see whether they take it, because you're going to be surprised with what they come up with, and that's why their audience loves them.
Got it. Okay, so have some kind of like guidelines, but don't be too restrictive with what sort of content they can create, and then obviously have a clear call to action. Yep. So I know we're running out of time a little bit here, but Eric, where can everybody find out more about you, about influencer marketing, or about Open Influence, what you guys do? What's a good spot to find you at? Yeah,
I mean, for me, just find me and follow me on LinkedIn. Just type in Eric Dahan and you'll see my picture. For Open Influence, follow us on LinkedIn as well, but go to our website, openinfluence.com, sign up for our newsletter, and follow us across social.
All right. So there you go, guys. That's how, Eric has built a huge influencer marketing agency over the last kind of like 5 to 10 years, really long period of time. What goes into running really good influencer marketing campaigns? Let us know if you have any questions. If there are future episodes or topics you want us to cover, let us know. And Eric, thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome, Jack. Thanks for having me.
See ya.
If you like the show, remember to share it with friends and coworkers. You can also check us out and share past episodes at blitzgrowth.com. Hit subscribe and leave a review letting us know how this podcast has personally helped you and your business. If you have any topics you'd like us to cover, make sure to send us an email via blitzgrowth.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on our next episode.